had too much of my identity tied up in what the scale said. And so God was just like, stop weighing yourself. That's not who you are. That's not your identity. Welcome back to the Kingdom Fasting Podcast. I'm Brianne Sims, RN.
I'm Dr. Sam Sims, nurse anesthesiologist.
And we are back with our series on what is fasting, why should it matter to me? And today we are talking about how the scale lies to you. And this one is super interesting.
You all knew it. You know, the scale lies to you.
It does, but it's scientifically proven.
Right. And so a lot of times, first of all, it's just weight. So it doesn't tell you if you've lost a pound of fat and you've gained a pound of muscle because you've been working out, your weight's going to be the exact same. So, you know, if you stepped on it and on the scale and it had a weight on there and then you got exercise, and this is where people get discouraged to look at this number. This number doesn't, well, one, it doesn't define you. And two, it could be wrong. And three, you might just need to wait a couple days and it will reset. First of all, that's the easy one. Pound of muscle, pound of fat. You know, so then you go like, how do my clothes fit? If they're fitting better, even though the scale is saying a weight, then, you know, ignore it. Okay, just that's again a pound of muscle. The scales that like they test your like, you know, and tell you how much bone mass you have, they're not really that accurate.
Yes.
Because I've had the DEXA scan, it's way more accurate than the scale.
Yeah.
So sometimes the scales are friendlier though. They like to tell you your body fat percentage is lower than it actually is. So sometimes you like that, but it's still lying to you apparently. To tell you, telling you the lie that you want to hear, you know. So another thing that happens is, and this has to do with how insulin resistant you are. So if your body is constantly flooded with insulin, your body will also become resistant to it. And there's this thing called metabolic syndrome or insulin resistant syndrome. And it happens to people that get flooded with, when their blood sugar goes up, your insulin goes up. People who have insulin resistant syndrome have increased waist size, they have high blood pressure, they have high blood sugar, they have high triglycerides, and low HDL, low good cholesterol. Okay? So.
Right. And I want to point out that typically insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome lead to diabetes.
Yes.
Type 2 diabetes.
So this is where they say like, well, sugar has never been shown to cause diabetes. It's because it leads to this first, that leads to that one next. So it's not really accurate, but yes, you're very likely to get diabetes if you have insulin resistant syndrome.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens, the more insulin resistant you are, is when you have sugar, your insulin will go up. We all know that. When your blood sugar's up, your insulin's up. Your blood sugar is an indirect measurement of insulin. So if your blood sugar's up, you know your insulin's up. But just because your blood sugar didn't go up doesn't mean your insulin didn't go up. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But insulin goes up. It tells your kidneys to store sodium. What is that? Sodium salt. Well, what happens when you store salt? You store water. It takes water with it. If you have a 50-calorie Twix, mini Twix, that will make your insulin go way up for 2 hours. And every time you drink any water, you're also storing sodium, so you're storing that water.
Yeah. And
16 ounces of water is a pound. Well, do you think you can drink 32 ounces in 2 hours? I bet you can. And so the next day when you go step on the scale, you're going to have one little mini piece of chocolate and you're going to be up 2 pounds because you told your body to store the sodium for 2 hours. And you're going to be like, I just had one piece of chocolate. Forget this. Now, if you wait another day, you'll not have chocolate, or you can have chocolate, but not have a high sugar load that day, then you will diurese that back off, and you'll actually maybe even be down 2 more pounds than you were. And it's worse the more insulin resistant you are. This is why certain people can eat the chocolate and not gain any weight, you know, or have the donut. And if you cut off a square off that donut and just lick the frosting, you're up 2 pounds the next day. You know, and they had 4 donuts and they're down 2 pounds. Like, I will murder you.
I don't scale lies to you.
I mean, that's one of the ways the scale lies to you. And so it's good to know that. But one of the things that also happens is they have all these, they call non-nutrient sweeteners. Okay, allulose is one, monk fruit is one, stevia is one, and so they'll give you these not medications. They give you to them like a medication when they study them. It's a really interesting way they give you this and say it doesn't affect your blood sugar. So one of the ways they'll give you stevia when they do the research, they'll give it to you in a pill where you don't taste it, or they give you allulose in a pill, or they give you monk fruit in a pill and you won't taste it, and then they'll test your blood sugar. And they say, well, your blood sugar didn't go up, so therefore it's fine. Or they'll actually send a tube down your nose and directly pump it in your stomach, and you won't taste it. And they'll say, well, your blood sugar didn't go up, so you're fine. But typically, they actually don't look to see what happens to your insulin. And when they do, something really interesting happens. So allulose doesn't make your blood sugar go up, okay? But when you taste it, the second you taste it, when you actually consume it the way you would consume it,
Right, when you taste the sweet
taste the sweet, your body says, oh, I am going to get something sweet. So I'm going to make the insulin go up right now. It actually calls what's called the cephalic response. It's a brain response. It goes to the brain and says, hey, we just tasted something sweet. It's going to the stomach. Go ahead and start putting some insulin out. So now your insulin's elevated with the allulose, but your blood sugar's not. So your insulin's up. So even if you're insulin resistant, you actually may be up 2 pounds because your insulin went up. The other thing they also found out with diet sodas, so a diet soda makes your insulin go up because you have the cephalic response. Blood sugar doesn't go up. But your body thought it was going to get these calories that it didn't receive. So you know what people do? They overeat their next meal. They compensate for the set calories they thought they were going to get.
Missing.
They're missing because your body like prepared for it. It's like, I'm going to get these calories and I never got it.
So it makes you hungrier.
Yeah, so diet sodas make you hungrier and you overeat the next meal to compensate for the fact that you didn't get the calories. And the insulin response is worse and longer with allulose than it is with sugar.
Yeah.
And so they actually have found, like, when they look at like these other sweeteners, these non-nutritive sweeteners, the response is actually you're more likely to get metabolic syndrome from non-nutritive sweeteners than you are from actual sugar. So actually, non-nutritive sweeteners are actually worse for you, more unhealthy. You'll overeat. You'll be more insulin resistant, and the scale will say you weigh more the next day.
Lots of reasons not to use any of the non-nutritive sweeteners.
Right. So use real sweeteners. And then the other one that happens a lot is alcohol. Alcohol it's inflammatory. It causes this inflammatory response. Your body responds to it like it's a poison. And so it breaks it down and it causes an inflammatory response to your entire body. And it pushes fluid out actually into your tissue. Mm-hmm. And that tissue, that fluid will stay in your tissue for up to 2 days. So if you go out and you drink a bunch, the next 2 days, your weight's going to be up. Yeah. Now, if you're celebrating your anniversary or you're celebrating or something like that, you just understand that I had some alcohol last night, my weight will be up for 2 days. If you never stop drinking, people who never stop drinking, they get puffy, they get swollen, their faces get red. It's because it pushes in there and they're inflamed. If they would stop drinking for just a couple days, that would actually decrease and their weight would actually go down. Right. So alcohol means 2 days on the scale. So sugar, 2 pounds on the scale, alcohol, 2 days on the scale.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how the scale lies to you.
Yeah, that's how the scale lies to you. This doesn't mean you can't live your life, but you need to understand why this happens. Yeah. And then you won't sabotage yourself or derail yourself or beat yourself down because, hey, I had some sugar or I had a donut yesterday. I'm going to have 2 pounds on the scale tomorrow. And I know why now. I can just wait a day. I had alcohol this weekend. I know it's going to be up. Maybe I won't step on the scale for the next 2 days. Maybe I'll just do that. Maybe I'm curious to see how it actually works, see how much actually weight I put on, and then over the next 2 days, I'm going to see how much that comes off. You can do that too.
Yeah, exactly.
So it allows you to see how the scale lies to you, understand it, and also not feel like you have to give up on your progress.
Right, exactly. And speaking of scale, and if you've listened to some of our previous episodes, we talked about fasting from certain things. And I have been fasting from weighing myself for 2 or 3 years now because it always just messed with my mind, my emotional health. Like I had too much of my identity tied up in what the scale said. And so I was just like, stop weighing yourself. That's not who you are. That's not your identity. Does not rely on the scale. You are who I say you are, not what the scale says you are. And so that could be another way of fasting for you if that's something that you struggle with. So yep. I just want to throw that 2 cents in there.
Yeah, it's good advice, especially when if you're fixating on a number, and you'll be able to tell when you need to fast. When your fat pants start to feel tight again,
time to do some fasting.
Time to do some fasting.
Yep.
Or maybe cut out alcohol for 2 days. I'm just saying, and no sugar. I mean, just for a couple days,
Yeah.
So
see what that does to you. See how you feel, because I guarantee you will feel better if you cut out alcohol and sugar from your diet for a while. That's another way of fasting. Yeah. Well, I hope you enjoyed those knowledge bombs from Dr. Sam, because I always find them interesting. So if you found them interesting, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends. Thanks for being here, and we will see you next time.